Hi everybody and welcome back to Lost Genre Reddit Stories. A quick warning before we begin, today's main story touches on the topic of stillbirth, so if that is a topic that makes you uncomfortable, you might want to skip the first story. Now let's get started. This post is from the subreddit Relationship Advice and it's by user ThrowarayTU449. My male 30, wife, female 26, has returned 1 year after leaving to find herself. How stupid am I for considering taking her back? My wife and I got married 6 years ago. I proposed to her after 4 months of dating, and we were married 3 months later. You could call it quick, and I'm not saying it wasn't, but it felt right. So it was me, my wife, and my son, who is now 8. Things were great. We found out we were expecting our first child together, and we were over the moon. Sadly, our baby was a stillbirth, and that started the fast decline of our relationship. It sent her into an extreme depression. It was like nothing could help her, and I was watching my beautiful wife die while still being perfectly physically healthy. A couple of months later, instead of waking up to her next to me, I woke up to a note of her telling me that she was going to clear her head. 1 week, no response. Before I knew it, she came back and retrieved half of her stuff. Then I was blocked on everything. It hurt, you know. I lost my baby and my wife left me in a matter of 2 months. I went into a pretty deep depression while also having to shun it away from my son. Things were hard. I was pretty much on autopilot and became severely underweight. After a while, things started to get a bit better and I just started feeling good, getting back into society with closer connections to good friends. My wife never came back during that period and I was just wondering when I'd be hit with the divorce papers. And you want to know who showed up at my doorstep at 5 a.m. this weekend? My wife. There were so many things I wanted to say to her. I wanted to know if she was okay. I wanted to beg her to come back. But at the same time, I wanted to tell her to leave and never come back. She came in and said that she spent the last 8 months 300 miles away and said she wanted to work on us. I smiled. We almost had sex. I took a good look in the mirror and I couldn't believe how stupid I was being. She came back, expecting me to welcome her back with open arms, and that's exactly what I did. I empathized with her deeply, and I saw how badly everything affected her. But 1 year? It felt unforgivable. I told her she needed to leave, and now we're here, and I'm on Reddit asking how I should proceed. Well, OP, the first thing is with caution, of course. Don't just jump into something without thinking. And I'm not talking about how quickly you got married because, well, we went over that already. Personally, I don't know if I could take her back. She was very much deep in pain, which I understand and I empathize with. But she went about it horribly. Without asking for help, she just left you and your son. How does he feel with all of this? I mean, I understand, not that I could feel what she went through, but I understand how devastated it must feel. But she wasn't alone in it. Like you said, you lost your baby too. Who was there with you? You couldn't grieve because you had to take care of your son. Instead of working through the pain together, she left to take care of herself and left you behind. I know you must still love her and you must worry about her, but I don't know if I could personally get over that. But of course, you have 2 choices. 1 is you get back together, 2, you don't. If you do decide for the first one, do it slowly and with couples counseling and therapy. But if you decide that it's best not to, which is the way that I would go, then you still should go to therapy. You were depressed and you couldn't deal with it because, well, of course you had to take care of your son. But it's still not a healthy thing or good for you, so you need to try to work through it. Maybe somebody can help you, a professional. And what do you guys think about OP's situation? What would you do if you were in his shoes? Let me know in the comment section, and now let's move on to the community comments to see what they said. Writing is everything says, I think you need to be brutally honest with her. Tell her that you can no longer trust her to be a reliable and committed spouse because of her actions. And that is a wound that cannot be healed easily. Then put the burden on her to earn back your trust before investing any more of your dignity in being with her. Live apart and give her the opportunity to rebuild a relationship with you. Then see if her effort is worthy of a second chance. She needs to bring more to the table than just words and remorse, and it must be proven over a significant amount of time, months at least. And Opie responds, I might just tell her what I wrote here, but elaborate more. It's hard because it feels like the time where I was praying for her to just come back to me wasn't even that long ago. And now here I'm deciding whether or not I truly want her to remain in my life. Herd Nerfer says, I don't think I could ever get past the fear of her just up and leaving out of the blue again. But if you really want to give it a go, you should go to couples therapy and talk everything out before committing to anything. And Opie responds, you are probably right. I don't think I could ever get over it, even if I wanted to. It will always be on the back of my mind and it'll keep me on my toes. Death Johnny says she left to find herself. Presumably, she was hurting from your lost child and needed to get away for perspective. It's fine to be empathetic towards her for that. She went through a very hard time. But you know what? You lost a child too. You had your own grief to work through and she abandoned you to do it alone. She's not a good partner. Fine. If things are so screwed up she has to leave, then okay. But she doesn't get to choose to come back and pick things up where you left off. I don't know how you could ever build that trust back, and I'm not sure why you'd want to try. And Opie responds, quote, and I'm not sure why you'd want to try, end quote. I'm not sure either. Maybe it's because when we were in love, we were deep in it, and we were ridiculously happy. I understand she was too hurt to probably realize I was hurting too, but I was the one who had to sort through all of our child's things after she left. I left her nursery up for 6 months before taking it down. I had to deal with all of that alone, and it was so hard. The only other person that could understand how I felt left. Additional information from Opie's comments. In the beginning, she did check up to see how we were. Then she stopped. She just vanished. There was still a part of hope in me that wished she would come back. So as long as I didn't get divorce papers, I wasn't filing. My son is good. It was hard on him and he would often ask me when she was coming back. She would call and talk to him and he'd even ask her. I went from saying soon to I don't know. Then he stopped asking. He's fine though. He's a very good and lively kid. Now, my wife is not his mom. His mom is my ex-girlfriend, but my wife was a mother figure, considering she was his stepmom for a good amount of time. I think that while her method completely sucked, it did help her in a way. She looked a lot better than the last time I saw her. She'd gotten therapy where she was and just spent a lot of time outdoors and finding herself again, which is why she went in the first place. But like I said, a text hello would have been nice throughout the year, but ultimately, she got what she wanted. When we talked after her return, I just asked her some questions and she answered. I asked her where she was, what she was doing, how she was supporting herself out there, and most importantly, if she was okay. Basically, she was in the middle of nowhere for a lot of her time. She'd used savings, personal, and help from family and eventually got a job to support herself. And she said she was feeling a lot better. But she missed us and how we were, blah blah blah. Fooled around, kicked her out, and that's the end. Okay, well, the community is giving OP different perspectives and things to think about, and some were weighing in. I think that third commenter said a lot of what I also said, and I agree with that. It's basically the trust. And the fact that with OP's context, now that she's better, she wants to get back, I don't know, I wouldn't do it. In any case, it's time to move on to the update to see how this story ends, but before that, if you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment in the comment section because it always helps. And of course, subscribe if you haven't become a part of our community yet. Now, let's move on with that update. For the people that want the short answer, I'm not going to try to work through things. Let me explain. I saw many comments suggesting that she'd been dating, floozing around, and even some indicating she'd gotten pregnant. False. Like she said, she went to heal, and I believe her. Because when I tell you she was depressed, I mean it got to the point where I had to make sure someone was in the house at all times just to keep guard that she didn't end herself. And I don't feel like arguing on a topic with people who don't know her. I'd been thinking too fairy tale like when I saw her, probably because that's how our story has been. We fell in love quickly, married young, and thought it was happily ever after together. When I'd seen her for the first time in such a long time, I saw my wife, the woman I fell in love with, my best friend and my life partner. That's who I instantly saw. But one quick good look in the mirror and a few days of thinking about it got me realizing that the same woman I married was not the same woman who left me. This past year has taught me, and I had to think back to how I felt the previous day before she showed up. I felt very good that past day. I spent the day with my son before dropping him off at his mom's. I went to a bar with friends and slept peacefully at my own home. My wife hadn't crossed my mind at all that entire day. I'd been happy beyond that past day. There is only one other person in my life right now that I need, my son. He's the reason I keep going every day. And for a quick moment, I considered trying things out with my wife. It was incredibly selfish towards him. I mentioned this before, but he truly is a great boy. I still have love for her, and I'm happy that she's alright, but we're over. I told her this. We went out and spoke about everything for hours. We finally cleaned up everything from the nursery. She got most of her stuff and she'll be back soon to get the rest. During our talk, she confessed that in the beginning, it just started with her feeling like she needed to get away from everybody and everything. Then, when she came back 2 weeks later, she said she felt even worse, so she decided to really leave. As for why she came back, it had been something she'd been wanting to do since the summer, but she didn't have the guts to do so. And if she did come back in the summer, I do think that I would have taken her back just based on where I was at that point. She did show remorse. She apologized and handed me letters that she wrote, wanting to mail them. I read each one. There were a couple for my son that I've chosen not to give him. She'll always be a part of my history. There's no erasing her or the love we had. What we had was magical at one point, but our story together ended in divorce. As for me, life's only moving and I have to make the best of it. So far I have been, and it's been going well. Now, I didn't think about starting completely from scratch, but I realized the emotional toll would be a lot. It's not even starting at square zero, but many steps back. I love her, but I had to ask myself if I could trust her. I do believe she needed some time to think and reflect, but it was the lack of communication, sudden abandonment, and the time period that really messed things up. I still have feelings for her, but I understand I can't be with her if that makes sense. Honestly, after our long talk, I have forgiven her. I know that she is not a bad person. She was always the sweetest person to anyone, no matter what was going on. But deep down, I know that the trust in our relationship has shattered to the point of no going back. I'm glad that she did get help. It was a lot. I mean, we did everything. We had the clothes to go, nursery set up, gender reveal, baby shower, etc. And then it's all gone in a quick moment. That really messes up a person. She did fight to stay married. She pleaded with me for a long time, and even when she was getting her stuff, she kept trying to get me to change my mind. I know she will keep trying to get back together because we've met up probably 4 separate times since she's come back, and each time it's just give me another chance or something along those lines. And I've just been holding the no pretty down. She's clearly doing a lot better, and here's to hoping things are only up for her from here. Also, I'm not going down that rabbit hole of quickly getting married again. At the time, it sounded like a good idea to propose to her, but I was only 23, so there's that. But I don't regret it. Those first 6 out of 7 years were really good, and it taught me a lot. Thanks for all the support and advice. Well, OP, I think you're making the right decision for you, for your son, and for your future. It's great to know that she's doing better, but you need to work on yourself too. And like you say, that trust thing, that's the most important one. Easy to break and lose, and so hard, maybe even impossible sometimes to win back. So if you don't think it can ever happen for you guys, then just move on. On that note, here's wishing you the best in the future for you and your son OP. Thank you for sharing and take care. And now let's finish this video with a mood booster post. This post is from the subreddit Malicious Compliance, and it's by user A Quiet Borderline. Brad and the Table. This story was told to me by my friend Lucy. At the time, she lived in an army town and worked for many summers at a restaurant popular with the officers and their families. At this particular restaurant, which is on the higher end, there's a table reserved for high-ranking officers who visit the base. People who worked there referred to it as the table. On busier nights, when there isn't a higher-ranking officer in town, it's utilized to seat more patrons, but for the most part, it's left alone. It's Friday, so it's busy. There is a general visiting the base, so the table isn't being used just in case he decides to grace the establishment with his presence. Lucy is manning her section when the owner, named John for the purposes of this story, waves her down. She heads over and he tells her, "I need you and Annie, another server, to help me man the table." "The general is coming?" she asked. "Nope, Brad is," he answered. Lucy rolled her eyes. Brad was a local bigwig's high school-aged son, and he had it in his mind that he was a hotshot. He frequented the restaurant with his girl of the week and proceeded to make a nuisance of himself every time, but not enough to the point that he was asked to leave. Lucy asked John, "Are you sure? What if the general wants to eat dinner with us?" At this, John leaned in with a wide smile and said, "Apparently, the general called and told us to give Brad the table and to give him and his guests anything he wanted." Lucy then smiled as she realized what was about to happen. Brad was about to get a serving of Malicious Compliance on the house. 20 minutes later, Brad, wearing a West Point blazer, arrives with several young people. John makes a big show of greeting them and escorting them to the table. The people look around impressed, and Brad proceeds to command Lucy, John, and Annie around like he owns the restaurant. The only good thing about this particular experience was that, due to him being underage, Brad and his buddies never tried to order any alcohol. Brad proceeded to be a nuisance, demanding more appetizers, sending food back because it wasn't cooked just right, ordering the most expensive entrees on the menu, yada yada yada. Lucy, Annie, and John continue with this, smiling as more and more food is added to the table. It's time for the check. Lucy told me that the entire group managed to rack up $843.29, not counting the mandatory gratuity because the party was above a certain size. Brad gets the bill and he flips out. "What is this?" he barked, waving the check. "It's your check," John said. "The general said to let you order anything you wanted." Brad stands up to argue, and that's when the host rushes up. Her face is white. "John, the general is here," she whispered. Everyone turns to look, and there's the general with his entourage. John excuses himself before going over. He and the general start to talk for a few minutes, and Lucy notices Brad turning white and starting to get out of his seat. Annie looked at him and said, "You better not try to dine and dash. I really don't want to sick these nice officers on you." Brad sat down and fidgeted. John and the general come back to the table. Making eye contact with Brad, John said, "Brad, you said the good general here insisted you have the table and that you can order anything you want. Is this true?" He only nodded. "Well, the general here said that he never made such phone call." "That's odd," Brad said before looking at the general. "I'm pretty sure it was you I talked to, sir." "I have the phone number. Let's call it," John said, pulling out his cell phone and dialing a number. That's when they hear Brad's brand new cell phone ringing off in his pocket. The general held his hand out and Brad put the phone in his hand. He checks the number and asks John, "Is this your number? 123-456-7890. "It is," John said. The general then proceeded to get a serious look on his face. "Brad, are you a cadet?" "I'm being considered for an appointment," Brad said. The general nodded. "I suggest you pay your bill, tip in full, and apologize to the staff for your behavior," he said to Brad. "I also suggest withdrawing your name as soon as possible to save yourself the embarrassment." Keeping his head down, Brad paid the bill, meekly apologized, and left with his sycophants. The general and his entourage patiently waited for the table to be cleared and set. They proceeded to have a nice meal, leaving generous tips. Then Lucy proceeded to have a wonderful Brad-free career. And that was the end of Brad's short-lived military career. Thanks for sharing, OP. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch it. Now, if you've gotten to this point in the video, I assume that you like these stories that I'm reading out. So here are a couple more that you might enjoy. And if you don't have any time to watch another story right now, save it for later. And also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.